right, brothers and sisters, welcome to the Southland Sermon. It's your boy, the Rev, and I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have enough hay on me for the two goats that I have on the show today, but you can see them here. We got Sam Herder from Hero Sports and Zach McKinnell from every place on the damn planet. In fact, Zach, I realized I made you a gift because I realized you do so much that I've got all your spots written down in this book that you have stuff. I need to make a cover for it, though, but we'll send it out to you. But guys, thanks for coming on. I really absolutely appreciate it. How you doing?
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Sam, I'll send you your check. Don't worry. But
yeah, no, you can keep it because that was a great intro that you always have on the show. So I mean, all good.
Awesome. Well, so let's go through. We're gonna go through the games last week. There's some stuff going on in the NCAA that came out today that I think we'll probably touch on in the games next week. Of course, since we are live, throw your comments in. If they're good enough, we'll put them up. But anyway, so let's go through the games last week. Lamar did what everybody thought they would do and beat up on Northwestern State 42-10. There was honestly no surprise in that game, except for the fact that maybe Northwestern State scored 10 points. That was probably the biggest shock to me. And that's not an insult to that team. It's just they haven't, put it together. But Robert Coleman had himself a day. I think he had 3 touchdowns in the air. And then Kalen Griffin had one on the ground as well, over 100 yards rushing. So Commerce almost, well, I want to say almost. They barely lost to Prairie View A&M, but it wasn't really they closed the gap from what it was in the first half. Zach, I don't know if you watched any of that or not.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think PV was the better team there, which is interesting. I mean, PV 2-0 now, right, against the Southland.
Yeah, they are 2-0, which surprises me because it seems like the Southland for some reason is able to beat the SWAC when they play head to head, even in games that they should not win, or games where they look absolutely atrocious and they manage to put stuff together in the fourth quarter, like Southern and McNeese, as an example. So. Nice win for Prairie View. McNeese loses to Nichols 24-19. I don't know, Sam. What are your thoughts on McNeese? Like without Clifton McDowell as a whole, I know he's still kind of nursing an injury. Like, is he that offense?
Well, for a little bit, it seemed like he was. He was playing super well, and I mean even 3-4 weeks in the season, like early Walter Payton Award discussion, like the plays he was making with his arm and his legs, he was kind of in that discussion and had some big fourth quarter moments as well. And now with him out, due to injury, just recently saw that story that he's going to be out for the rest of the year. That's tough for McNeese, who's also, been battling a lot of injuries as well on the defensive side of the football. So that was a, kind of an underrated loss right there for McNeese and Nichols getting a win because it seemed like McNeese was kind of flirting with being a playoff potential team, but now hitting, I believe they're down to 5 losses now, or up to 5 losses. That's kind of going to put you on the wrong side of things, I think.
Yeah, but if you look at them from where they were last year, though, it's still
right. Yeah.
Something to hang their hat on, but then also worry about the future because I don't think they have McDowell next year, right? He was a one and done, and so do you have Six Killer as your quarterback? And great I don't name. Know. Yeah, right. That's absolutely probably one of the best names in football.
I think McDowell might try to get an injury red shirt or hardship, whatever you call it. I don't know if that means he would come back to McNeese or transfer, somewhere else again. I'm not sure, but his playing career might not be totally done just yet if he can get that hardship granted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, we hope for the best for him because you don't want to see a player injured. So we'll go to the game of the week in a second. But first, SFA did what they probably should have done on homecoming and just beat Houston Christian 55-6. I said this last week as an SFA fan. It's the most frustrating team I've ever watched in my life because they have the weapons now, I think, and we'll probably get more of this in a second, but they have a good quarterback, a good running back, a good receiver, which in the past few years they've had maybe one of the three or two of the three. And they should be 7-1. They absolutely should be 7-1. They should be ranked in the top 25, but there have been decisions, I think, that have hampered that. My question, I guess, for you, both of y'all, since I think you both vote on this, is Vidlac someone that you would look at for Walter Payton?
Statistically, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you're just basing off of stats, he's
just
there.
Off stats. Yeah.
I mean, off of stats, he has the resume, but I just think the problem is, like, for me as a voter, and I'm no Sam will speak for himself, and I think me and Sam both agree the voters have a very different voting process depending on who you talk to. But I mean, he's thrown for 2,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 3 picks. That's an outrageous production. But the problem is, who has he done it against? And with Stephen F. Austin not even being a top 25 team right now, I just don't know if he's going to have the cachet to get there. Because even like the guys from smaller schools who you've seen get in the conversation, like a Tim DeMorit, Fordham was having like a legendary season with him getting to the playoffs, potentially winning playoff games. That's not what Stephen F. Austin is right now. Now, if SFA finishes the year and wins out and sneaks into the playoff, and it's because of Vidlak's arm, maybe he can get in there. But when you're comparing him against the Tommy Millott, who probably haven't had his Walter Payton moment yet, but he has the cachet of playing at Montana State. And when you look at the moments that Cam Miller has had, it's tough to put him in that conversation, along with the 10 running backs that seem like they're going to run for 1,500 yards this year. Is this a tough year for, I think, Vidlak to break in?
Yeah, I think with Vidlak, I assume he's going to be a finalist. I don't know when that list comes out. Basically, there's a preseason watch list for the Walter Payton Award. Then Stats Perform adds, whichever players deserve to be on there. So I'm guessing he'll be a top 30, 40 finalist. The list usually gets pretty long, but he kind of just gets, as far as like statistically, which is what a lot of people look at, like him and like Paxton DeLaurent and Miles Hastings, Jacob Clark, like they kind of are all somewhat similar numbers, and so they all kind of clump in, and they don't necessarily separate themselves from each other. Meanwhile, Cam Miller and Tommy Millott might not have as big a throwing numbers, but like passing efficiency, they're 1 and 2, and PFF grades, they're 1 and 2. No interceptions, that sticks out. Some rushing yards as well. So I think that it's hard to kind of separate Vidlak kind of out of that group of quarterbacks that I mentioned. And like Zach said too, there's so many. There's like 5 good running backs that you could all put like within your top 5 of your Walter Payton Award finalists.
So
and also, my
sorry.
bad.
No, go ahead. Zach.
And then also too, I'm not confident he might, because if I'm not mistaken, most of the finalists are selected by the conferences. Usually they're offensive player of the years. Are we sure Vidlak's going to win it over Calzada just because of Incarnate Word winning the conference? Because Calzada's having a really good year, not as good of a year statistically as Vidlak, but a lot of these conferences have a problem of just voting the best player on the best team.
I bet Calzada gets that.
I would think so too. Unless something happens with Incarnate Word, right? That would be the thing too. Yeah. But it kind of brings up a question, like, do you think the paradigm has shifted a bit on this award? Because I remember there were some award winners, like take Zach Zenner, for example. He ran for 2,000 yards at South Dakota State and did not win because he lost to Taylor Heineke 1 year. I'm trying to remember what it was there's a quarterback, like quarterbacks were just insane numbers. And it wasn't, to me, it just seemed like it was a truly pure stats award versus being more, it seems like the paradigm has shifted to where it's now a true MVP award. Versus,
I could see that. Because I mean, Jeremiah Briscoe won it back-to-back years. Like 2018, he won it over Easton Stick. And so like that was kind of a prime example of, kind of county numbers and all of that. But it does seem like maybe it shifted a little bit because Trey Lance won it in 2019, and he didn't have, he had really good numbers, but not like jaw-dropping numbers or anything like that. But then again, you can like go back to like Lindsey Scott, like he absolutely deserved it. But he also had like just jaw-dropping numbers as well. It seems like whoever wins it this year is probably not going to have like record-breaking numbers or anything like that. And so maybe that's why it feels like that as well.
Yeah, and that might be just due to, you're comparing it. I think the voters have really shifted too. There's a lot of people who vote now who may. Listen, me and Sam probably were too young to even vote. If you go back to like the 2010s, they probably didn't want us voting, like in high school and stuff like that. So, but I think the voting has shifted. And also too, I do think it's an improvement in FCS media as a whole. How I do think there's more people right now who watch the whole subdivision than maybe there was even at that time. So I'm glad that it's shifted, because it shouldn't be just a truly statistical award. It should take into account moments and who you've done it against and who's really the best player at this level.
And there are less voters too now. I think there's like, for people that don't know, the people that vote on Buck Buchanan, Walter Payton are the same people that vote for the Stats Perform top 25. It's the same voting panel. And there's like 55-ish voters? 56. Yep. Like a few years ago, there was like 100, maybe not 100, like 80 voters. And so I think Craig has done a good job of kind of whittling that number down a little bit and making sure he has at least 2 representatives per conference, and then kind of a more national panel as well that he knows really pays attention to things. And so that could also be why it seems like some of the voting has shifted as well as far as the voting mindset.
No, that's all very fair. And it'd be really interesting to see what happens with this year's, because I have my opinion on who I think should win it. It's not Cam Miller. And I know people are going to say, why not? And I think it's Tommy Mellott. But the thing is, Cam Miller's had his Peyton Award winning moment, right? The driving in South Dakota is going to be the thing. Well, Mellott hasn't had that yet. And maybe it's the competition he's faced, or maybe it's Montana State's really that good, and he's not going to have the opportunity to have a moment like that. But I don't know. I think that's probably one, two, who, like, I think it's them. And then you got to look at, like, Britton, Powell, and Targi Lamb in there as top 5.
It's going to be tough for a running back, I think, because I think the running backs are still playing well, but they've kind of slowed down a little bit. Like, I don't know if anyone's on pace to hit 2,000. I think that's where it was going to have to be, is someone to hit like 2,000 rushing yards to win it. And so, but I do think the dark horse right now is Miles Hastings, because if UC Davis finds a way to beat Montana and Montana State down the stretch, and let's just say UC Davis finishes 11-1, it's going to be real tough not to give it to Hastings.
Yeah, I had Hastings in my top 5 last week, and UC Davis fans said, "Oh, I really, really like the Miles Hastings pick," but I bet UC Davis fans would, if they were to nominate a player, it'd be Lan Larison because of what he does out of the backfield, catching in and running the ball. But my defense or my pushback was like, well, Hastings, his play has taken UC Davis from a good team to a really good team. Like, he's playing really, really well right now. And so that's kind of why I favored Hastings for that number 5 slot for me rather than Lan Larison, but both are certainly deserving.
No one, I mean, agree. And I don't envy you guys having to vote on this, just so you know, like I really and truly don't. I guess real quick before we get other stuff, let's talk about the game last week. Incarnate Word edges out Southeastern Louisiana. And I mean, edges out like that, just a missed field goal away from going in overtime. And so my question is, we know what Incarnate Word is. We've seen this year. We've seen them keep in with the MVFC teams that they played. They're doing what's expected in the Southland. I think my question for y'all is Southeastern Louisiana one of the best teams who've won the worst records? And I mean overall records, because they're 4-4, but 2 of those losses are FBS losses.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I was going to point at like Eastern Washington too, but Southeastern Louisiana has the head-to-head on Eastern Washington. But the Eagles have kind of battled some top Big Sky teams pretty tough, despite being, I think, 2-6 now. But I think Southeastern Louisiana could take that because, 2 FBS losses. The South Dakota State loss was an ugly one, but the Tarleton loss was a really close game as well. So I had Southeastern Louisiana ranked last week, and there was a quality loss. I guess you could say, nearly beating and really competing well with UIW. But with Stony Brook getting an upset, I had to move Stony Brook in. So Southeastern Louisiana ended up going from number 25 to out of my ballot this week. But I liked what I saw from them leading into that UIW game, and it feels weird to punish them for only losing by 3 points to a top 10 UIW team, but it was kind of just making room for a Stony Brook to get into the top 25.
Yeah, I give them credit for scheduling, because I know out of conference scheduling has been a big conversation for the Southland, but maybe we can tone it down just a bit next year. Like maybe we can leave the South Dakota States out of it, and 2 FBS games. Like give them some wins somewhere, because I think you got to give Selfo some credit, because he has been really competitive in the Southland outside of last year. Last year that team was just bad. They had some really terrible injuries, but I'm with you. I think they're one of the better teams with just a terrible record just because of their schedule. You mentioned 3, I think it was a 3-point loss to Tarleton, 3-point loss to Incarnate Word, and that Tarleton game was on the road, if I'm not mistaken, too. So that was a really good road loss. It was just, they just have a brutal schedule, man. And I wouldn't be surprised if they went out, to be honest with you guys. Yeah, they should possibly win out.
Their schedule favors them. I mean, they should have lost to SFA, but come to why they should, in a second. But no, like I think Selfo honestly is probably one of the best coaches in the conference. I know that Killo is going to get all 11 in Cardinal Word, and he should, but Selfo, man, like, scheduling the two FBS games, when you look at the dynamics of Louisiana football and schools and funding, they don't have money, and they get asked every year to reduce their athletic budgets. And so they've got to take those two body bag games to fund their stuff. And it's happening. It happened with them. It happened with Nichols, and it's a brutal thing because you effectively schedule yourself out of the playoffs. Now, I'm proud of them for playing up also on their schedule and not scheduling North American like certain teams did this year. But yeah, maybe there is a balance there, right? Maybe you don't do two FBS games and then go on the road to California, right off, or go, like right. you don't do something like that. You save your body.
Schedule a SWAC team or schedule a Big South OVC team or a SoCon team. Yeah,
because I do think the Lions can win out, and that would put them at 7-5 overall, 7-3 versus the FCS. 7 wins probably isn't going to get you into the playoffs this year. But if you take out one of those FBS games and you schedule a bottom team in the UAC or bottom team in the SoCon, whatever, like all of a sudden you're sitting at 8-4, and maybe you have a decent chance to make the playoffs this year. So it's tough because obviously money is tight. But at the same time, like payout wise, like what are they getting from Tulane? Like $300,000. Like,
yeah,
hopefully you can find that $300,000 elsewhere to kind of put your players in a better position to compete for playoff spots.
Yeah. And that I was going to bring that question up too. Like, so if we look at the conference right now, Incarnate Word has a head against Southeastern Louisiana, but let's say something happens, SFA beats Incarnate Word, SFA wins out the rest of their schedule, right? Southeastern Louisiana has the head-to-head against SFA, and they went out. They would have one loss in the conference. SFA now has 2 losses in the conference, so they're probably still out of the playoff conversation anyway, unless teams lose multiple times, right? Like, I think for SFA to get in, especially with their weak strength of schedule outside of conference, their season's done. But let's say something weird like that were to happen. Does the Southland get multiple teams in or not? So
this is if Incarnate Word doesn't win the conference?
Yeah. Well, that's if Incarnate Word, so that's the thing. Let's say if Incarnate Word were to lose to SFA, they would still win the conference championship because they have the head-to-head against Southeastern Louisiana. But let's say they manage to somehow stumble and lose 2 games. Or maybe they do, even at that point, let's say they do tie with Southeastern Louisiana. In that scenario, would the Southland get multiple teams? Or is it diminished even further?
I think because SFA would have 9 wins in this.
I think y'all
would 9 wins, but two losses. We'd have 2 conference losses.
But you guys would have 2 ranked wins to end the season because Abilene Christian's a top 20 team right now.
I was going to say
Incarnate Word. So y'all would be in my opinion, if Stephen F. Austin finishes 9-3 with back-to-back ranked wins to end the season. I don't see how you guys are left out.
I don't know what's happened. I mean, I want to say back-to-back ranked what's happened before.
Yeah.
McNeese was left out at 9-2 a handful of years ago, but they also didn't have it. Yeah, they also didn't have any ranked wins.
Lehigh,
but you guys would have. So you guys would have what 2 ranked wins on?
Mm-hmm.
No, 3 because Lamar was ranked, and the committee considers now ranked or then ranked wins. So I just don't see how a 9-3 team with 3 ranked wins gets left out. That would be tough, even with the North American game. That would be brutal to see. And I mean, the thing that's I think, and I had a conversation with this with Timothy is I do think the Valley kind of collapsing behind those top 4 teams is really helping because with North Dakota losing to Youngstown, if Illinois State drops a game they're not supposed to, the Valley is probably only getting 4 bids this year, in my opinion. Like I don't think North Dakota and Illinois State's a guaranteed in. That would be the best case for like a Southland or SoCon to get an extra bid.
Yeah, you want like 2 Southland teams to kind of pull away pack because you don't want. I mean, parity is great, but like I'm trying to think if I get this order correct. Like Lamar beats Weber State, and then it looked like Lamar was going to have a decent path of the playoffs, but then Lamar, I think, loses to was it SFA?
They lost to SFA.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then SFA lost to Southeastern Louisiana.
Yep.
And so it was just like, and then Southeastern Louisiana loses, understandable loss. But it was just like, as when you look at teams, they might have a pathway to the playoffs, then they drop a game. And then the winner of that game, looks like, they can make a run and hit 8-9 wins, but then they drop a game. So that week-to-week parity is fun, conference-wise. But at the same time, if you're just chopping each other up, it really puts a lot of teams in that kind of 7-win range when it comes to the playoff bubble.
Yeah, I think to your point, parity is the worst thing that can happen to a small conference. Like honestly, it's something we kind of see with like the SoCon too as well, right? When they start cannibalizing each other as they get into the season, it diminishes how many they get in, and there's teams that get left out of the SoCon that probably deserve to be in the playoffs, but because of the parity there. Speaking of the playoffs, though, this is a fun thing. It came out that the committee was going to not utilize the polls, and you can tell me if I'm saying this wrong, that they're not going to utilize the media polls or the coaches poll for determining the stuff in the playoffs. They're going to use KPI, Massey, and the ESPN index. Did I miss anything, or was that the gist of it?
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm just pulling it up as well.
Yeah.
So I think those are the three that they're going to utilize, and like it's a combination of like projecting. Like some of those have like projecting tools, and others are just overall overall kind of like power rankings, in a sense. And so I know some of those more computerized metrics, those definitely have its flaws. You can just tell with some of the rankings, obviously, but I did like that they took the polls off of that, because there's just kind of a conflict of interest in that. Like obviously there's a conflict of interest with the coaches poll, because coaches might be trying to float up their conference. And then in the media poll too, I think the media poll is decently solid, but you still have conference reps and people that are employed by teams voting in that. And I'm not saying this does happen, but you could kind of come to the conclusion that, this one person might vote their team very, very high, just so if they're on the playoff bubble, I'm going to give my team more votes. And so instead of being number 18, they're number 15, and that can help them when it comes to selection. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but you could, if you wanted to, jump to those conclusions if you wanted to. So I'm happy that they took the two polls out. And I knew before the season they were looking at adding some more metric based stuff. But at the end of the day, like each committee member will weigh things differently. I mean, what was the one that had like Drake or Butler or someone?
That was the KPI. That's the KPI.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, for the folks who are watching or can listen to this later, here's the current top 10 according to the KPI. NDSU, Dartmouth, Rhode Island, Drake, South Dakota State's 5th, Montana State's 6th, Missouri State's 7th, which they're not eligible anyway. Neither is Dartmouth, but I digress. 8's Montana, 9's Villanova, 10's Mercer, and then the next 5 are South Dakota, Delaware, Butler, Stony Brook, and Harvard. So Drake's got to be happy they're getting that 3 seed.
Yeah. Send NDSU to Drake just to make up for last year.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, with formula based stuff with that, like there's always going to be flaws. Like they might just weigh overall wins like heavier, like for a team like Drake, but also at the same time, like if things don't shake out, like where that formula like works itself out by the end of the year, and the playoff committee members are seeing that Drake is a top 5 team, like I'm guessing they're not going to have a conversation. Oh, should Drake be a top 5 seed? Like for how much crap we give the playoff committee, like they have a ton of data at their disposal, like just tables and spreadsheets and everything. And like they watch a lot of the games too. So when I saw that ranking, Zach, that you tweeted out, I'm like, well, if this is how it shakes out at the end of the year, like they're probably not going to use this ranking, because they're going to know, okay, there's a flaw in this. Drake is not actually a top 10 team in the country.
And so Zach Carlson, shout out Zach from a certain FCS poll as well. He has this question: will the poll remain relevant because ranked wins are still taken into account? Or are they going to throw ranked wins out of the equation also? And I don't know if that was necessarily clear in the things that we've seen come out.
I still think they're going to include ranked wins. That's why I was telling people the poll still definitely matters, because how do you determine ranked wins? So I don't think the polls are going to become irrelevant, because you still have to consider ranked wins, because how do you determine what's a good win, what's not? So I would be shocked if if the polls just became completely relevant to the playoff committee. I just don't think they're going to take into account what the exact stats per firm poll or coaches poll says at the time that they meet to determine who's in the playoffs.
That makes perfect sense. So I guess my other question to y'all, out of these 3 metrics, what do you think is the most accurate?
If I had to pick one,
Yeah,
Oh,
like I'm just
man.
probably Massey just because I'm most familiar with it, and it does. Like I usually use Massey just for strength of schedule, but I still
Yeah.
click through it just to see what their ratings are, and it usually seems pretty fair. Now this is where every metric has its flaws because it does seem like Massey or Sagarin like kind of has like a massive, not a bias. I don't know if the computer has a bias, but whatever the formula is, like they really, really like the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Where like even at times like a 3-4 Northern Iowa team was like ranked number 11th, just because like they must really give credit to beating Missouri Valley Football Conference teams. So again, every metric is going to have its flaws, whether it's human-based polls or these computerized models that have some type of formula that spits out a ranking.
Yeah.
And Brendan brings up a good point too. He's like, I think we need to use SOS based off of FCS only schedules because we don't count FBS losses anyways, nor do we count D2 wins. So
That's I mean, because Mercer's strength of schedule is going to shoot up because they play Alabama.
Exactly.
That's not really fair, right? So that's a good point.
Yeah, because Chattanooga is like 25th or 20th, I think, in strength of schedule, and it's mainly because Tennessee is like a top 10 team, and then also have Georgia State on that schedule as well. So it definitely is bumping up Chattanooga a bit. And like you said, Mercer didn't get a chance to play, an FBS team yet. So they're, I think, in like the 80s right now, which is weird because they have the second most ranked wins in the country right now, which is crazy.
Yeah. I was like, Zach fluff his poll there for a second. So I mean, it's very. I think it's just very interesting I'm very interested to see what the first take on seeding is, like when that comes out. Or whatever it is that they're going to put out this week.
I don't know what to expect, honestly, because I do think, like, I think all three of us could predict who probably the top 4 or 5 teams are going to be. Yeah. But like through that 6 through 10 range is going to be very, very interesting, I think, on Wednesday, just because how are they going to look at an Idaho? How are they going to judge a SEMO who doesn't really have a statement win yet? How are they going to look at a Mercer who just got blown out 2 weeks ago but has some of the most ranked wins in the country? I'll be very curious. I think there's a few teams that stick out to me as interesting evals, even like an Incarnate Word. I think iTest tells you they're probably a top 10 team right now, but their resume is not top 10 right now.
Yeah. Well, I think we know 3 of the top 4 schools will have Dakota somewhere in their name.
Yeah.
I think that's a given with Davis probably 5th, but yeah, 6 through 10, because you could see technically see Tarleton in the mix. I don't think they're there now, but if Tarleton were to win out, then you would have to put them there because they have wins against UC and ACU. You can see, but like Idaho, Idaho's been decimated by injuries, and yet they've hung in games and still, imagine what a healthy Idaho would be and potentially getting their QB back, what they're going to become. So yeah, I'm very, very interested to see how this comes out. I'm also interested to see how many people get mad about where their team is too.
Yeah.
So.
One team that I'm really curious about is Chattanooga, because I have them in my top 10 right now. And I think in the media poll, they're like in the 20s. And I don't even know if they're
25th.
ranked.
25th in the media
and
poll.
then the coaches poll, they're not even ranked. And like they're 5-3 right now, 2 FBS losses, but one of the FBS losses was by 3 points to Georgia State. They only lost to Mercer by 7 points, who's a top 15 team. They have 1 ranked win right now over ETSU, and look at the remaining schedule. At Western Carolina, that's going to be tough. At the Citadel, decently tough. Versus Sanford. At Austin P, who's down this year. Like all of a sudden, we could be looking at it'd be a 10 or a 9-1 versus the FCS Chattanooga team with 1 or 2 ranked wins. 1 quote unquote quality loss over Mercer, because if Mercer wins out, Mercer could be a top 4 or top 5 seed, because Mercer could be a 1-loss FCS team with like 4 ranked wins. And then all of a sudden you look at Chattanooga and you go, oh, that's a pretty good resume for Chattanooga. Yeah. So I have 0 expectations that Chattanooga is going to be in this top 10 this week, but I could see the mocks like slowly creeping toward a top 10 seed as we get closer to Selection Sunday. They also could lose at Western Carolina and then just, forget what I just said.
That'd be the par for the course.
Yeah, that'd be the worst case for the SoCon though, because no chance. Like, because I think Western Carolina might be out of it, even though I do think they're good enough to make it. Yeah. It's just like the losses are adding up for the Catamounts right now. Also, too, Rhode Island to me is just the biggest question mark right now, because just straight resume, they technically have a ranked win, undefeated against the FCS, but iTest tells you they're not like a top 10 team. But eventually, if they keep winning, if they go undefeated through CAA play, how do you not put them in a top 8 seed?
Right. And they would have they would have one ranked win, I guess, at the time of the game.
Yeah.
New Hampshire, Delaware, you could kind of count as a rankable win when be a legit ranked win, just because Delaware isn't being able to be ranked this year. But I don't know. This is why, like, there's a saying like, "Oh, a win is a win," but at the same time, it's kind of not, because if you are lacking ranked wins and you beat Long Island by 7 and you beat Hampton by 2 points in double overtime, and Brown by like 10 points, like, the committee, like, really, they dive into resumes, pretty deep. It's not just, okay, this team is 10-0, whatever, okay, versus the FCS, okay, whatever, 7 seed. Like, they dive into it and look at it. And if they see no ranked wins on the resume against currently ranked teams, they're going to dive into a lot of these wins, and they're going to see some of these close victories by Rhode Island, okay, and go and say, okay, is this a top 8 seed though? Like, yeah, they're undefeated and they won the CAA, hypothetically, but is that a top 8 seed? I don't know. It probably will be a top 8 seed, but there's just no guarantee that would happen.
Yeah, and then Andrew asked this question: would SEMO get a seed when their past opponent's record is 18-46?
Yeah, I mean, because they beat Southern Illinois when they were ranked. I think UT Martin has been in and out of the rankings.
Yeah.
I have them ranked.
They shouldn't have lost to New Mexico State. That's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's
close loss. Yeah.
Well, so
and also Tennessee State. If Tennessee State beats UT Martin this weekend, that could be a chance for them to get a ranked win, because Tennessee State's 25th right now.
Yeah,
so that could be another chance. So if you're a SEMO fan, I would be rooting for. I mean, they probably get benefited either way, because UT Martin would jump in the rankings if they won. But that's what SEMO really needs to happen.
And they need to crush their opponents too, like beating Gardner Webb by, was it 7 points? I think, like one score, maybe it was 10 points. But like that again, that's gonna style points, I think, matter when you lack ranked wins on your resume.
Yeah, and they were trailing 14-0 early 20. Like, it was like like
they
did not look
picks.
Yeah, they did not look good early, and that's one of the things that I mean, there's the eye test there too as well. So yeah, they really should have beat New Mexico State. Like, that's sucks for them. And then to the point you were talking when you were talking about teams, like Western Carolina, man, like, they just can't finish games. That's what it is with them, and I think that's gonna end up dooming them as they go through the rest of their schedule. I mean, I like them. I like Western Carolina a lot, but
that Campbell loss could be brutal.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, flip that one game and they're probably in right now.
Exactly. So here, let's go through the games for next week real quick. So Houston Christian is traveling to San Antonio to play Incarnate Word in the quietest environment in the Southland. I don't know if you guys have been to a game at Incarnate Word, but you can hear everything that goes on the field when you're in the crowd. It's amazing. You hear play calls, but anyway, so honestly, I think this is probably one of the ones where Incarnate Word rolls through. Houston Christian, I think, is a better team than they've been in previous years, but I think Incarnate Word's another level in the Southland. Yeah.
UIW big.
Yeah, I would say slap your money on the table for that one. Take them big. Sam, you agree?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yep. SLU goes to Beaumont to play Lamar. I'm so disappointed in Lamar. Well, I won't say disappointed, but Lamar was my dark horse, right? They were the team that I thought we're going to have it all put together. And while they've looked better, they just haven't been what I thought they would be. I think Southeastern Louisiana, though, has kind of like just put it together on the right moment. I think getting the come from behind win against SFA, and then yes, they lost to Incarnate Word, but what a game that they played. I think even with that loss, they're still going to have momentum going into Beaumont.
Yeah, I would lean SLU here. I think they're the more complete team, and they've been running the football pretty well. And with Lamar, it's just I do think they've had some injuries. That, like, they lost it was Coleman out for like 2 or 3 weeks, and it really impacted them. Mm-hmm. And then their defense is good. It's just wasn't as good as I was projected. So yeah, I'm going with SLU here, even on the road.
Sam?
Yeah, I would go there as well. Yeah, it's interesting with these two programs too, because Lamar is kind of the upstart, and then Southeastern took a step back the last couple of years after being a playoff consistent team, but it seems like they're starting to get their mojo back, Southeastern Louisiana, and yeah, they are running the ball really well, and that should travel pretty well.
Yep. Let's see. A&M Commerce goes to the Clifton McNeese Cowboys. Now, A&M Commerce is 1-7 this year. They did, look better second half and fourth quarter against Prairie View, but without McDowell, I still think McNeese is still the better team here. They're still more put together. I think this is, especially playing in Lake Charles, seems like an easy win for McNeese, but it also seems like nothing comes easy for McNeese this year.
They'll find a way to win. It's all good. I'll take them.
Yeah, I think at home they'll get a win, but there's always like some just weird results that also do happen, especially on an FCS slate where it's kind of, you go into it, you're kind of like, there's nothing really great nationally here. Like there's one ranked matchup, but then all of a sudden there's just you look deeper into some of the games and there's just like crazy results elsewhere. So I think McNeese would win, or is going to win, but you never know if crazy things can happen.
Yep. And then last but not least, Stephen F. Austin, a team that loves to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, goes to Thibodaux to play Nichols. This one's an interesting game, and this kind of ties into the question that I was going to bring up. But Colby Carthel, SFA is 5-2, should probably be, or 5-3. They should probably be 7-1 with a loss to UNT. Their loss against McNeese, bad coaching decisions, leaving your All-American kicker off the field and leaving points off the board. Their loss to Southeastern Louisiana. This isn't a slight against Southeastern Louisiana, but SFA had that game won, and then basically played soft prevent that entire drive. So the question, this was asked on the FCS Fans Nation podcast, but is Colby Carthel on the hot seat, and what does he have to do to keep his job? I think he has to make the playoffs. I mean, I think he's probably one of the most successful. He has one of the coaches with the best record this year, maybe best up in Eastern Washington. I mean, they're playing better, but I think he has to make the playoffs, or else he's going to lose his job with a winning record.
When you asked how that, my first thought was like, make the playoffs, and that'll help. And I don't, maybe they're still recovering from that jinx us voters put on them back in the season of 2022.
Jeez.
I want to say they kind of got like the preseason darling hype put behind them heading into that year, and obviously that didn't work out. And the thing with hot seats too is, like, sometimes you have to take into account, like, is it a contract year? Is it not a contract year? Because, unless you have the donor base of like Montana that will cough up the money to fire your coach after a 7-4 season, like, you don't often see coaches getting fired before their buyout. But if the fans, really push for it, then, that can make a difference if they can come up with that money. It's not as cutthroat, obviously, as FBS, but, sometimes there can be some donor pressure and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's 8 or 9 wins is probably where I'll put it, just because I think it's tough with playoffs, because I think if he wins out, it's tough to fight. Like, if he wins 9 games and Stephen F. Austin gets left out on the bubble, you can't fire a coach after winning 9 games. That would just be insanity. So I think if he gets to 8-4, 9-3, it'd be really, really tough to fire him, man. Because then you put the pressure on the administration. If you miss on the hire, you're going to look back and be like, man, we just fired a coach who won 8 or 9 games and now we suck. Yeah, that's how ADs and presidents get in a lot of trouble. So I think you have to be careful. But I think if he gets to 8 or 9 wins, he keeps his job.
I'll say McBroom coming in from West Texas A&M. Like, those two knew each other at the D2 level, and Carthel coached at Commerce, right? So I think he knows that Carthel has the potential to coach a championship team, because he did do it at Commerce when they were D2. But, man, just some of the decisions this year have not just reflected, I don't think, very well on him. But I guess back to the game, we got the power run of Nichols and the beast that is Guggenheim in the backfield. That dude still scares me every time I see him against Sam Vidlak and that SFA pretty balanced offense in Thibodaux. Zach, who do you got?
I'm going with Stephen F. Austin here. I just think they're too explosive. Just because Nichols is going to try to just run it down your throat. I will say McQuaid's playing a lot better than I thought he would this year, but I just think SFA is too explosive, and their defense is a lot better than I think people give them credit for. And so I'm going to go SFA in a close one.
Sam?
Yeah, I kind of just have a gut feeling that Nichols is going to get this one, just because of, kind of the, kind of just the way the Southland has been this year, when it seems like some teams are gaining traction, they get knocked off. And I'm still, like, I'm not as high on Nichols as I was anymore, as I was in the preseason, obviously, just with some of their performances. But I remember going back to the preseason, and I looked at Nichols it's okay. They have a bulk of their returning lineup coming back, and I think they had the most returning all Southland players and veteran squad. And so I was decently high on Nichols. And so I think them being at home, veteran team, I think they have a good opportunity for a win here. And, Guggenheim has been there forever. And I was kind of going through who I would put as my top 5 Buck Buchanan award guys right now. And I think Ennis from Nichols has a decent argument to be, somewhere top 5, top 10. I think he's playing at a high level. So I would probably, just to differ here, I would probably lean Nichols to get the home win.
I have more confidence in picking bye over Northwestern State than I do picking this game, because I can see it going either way. It is, but SFA has done okay they did okay in Beaumont on the road. I don't know. This is a, 3 out of the last 4 have been on the road for them, so that's a tough one. I think it'll be a fun one to watch. I guess I'm picking SFA. I feel like I'm giving us a kiss of death now, but hey, if SFA loses, then the conversation we've had for the past 5 minutes on them, it almost becomes moot at that point. Mm-hmm. Brent, real quick before we go, Brendan had a comment. I got to find it. It was a pretty good one. I may just have to do it from memory. Wait, here it is. Pick a surprise semifinal team from the Southland, UAC, SoCon.
Mercer. I don't know. I'm still unsure about Tarleton. They play Abilene and Central Arkansas at home in the 2 regular season, or the last 2 games of the regular season. So I think Tarleton can go anywhere from like a number 16 seed to like a number 5 seed, just depending on how those games go. So I think like either Tarleton or Central Arkansas could maybe be a semifinalist if they get a good draw. So, and then what was the other? Was it like Southland, SoCon? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, UIW would be the choice, obviously, from the Southland. Yeah. And as they showed against South Dakota State, like they can be a dangerous team. With that passing attack, and Calzada's feeling it. They get athletes out in space, and so just depending on the matchups, if you can go to, let's just say UIW goes to Idaho in the quarterfinals or whatever, like that's a decent matchup, indoors. But if they go to Montana State in the quarterfinals, like that's not as good of a draw there. So it's so much of it is about matchups and who you get paired with.
Yeah, and I think a good surprise team if they make it, and this take a lot. I think if they were to somehow get in, Abilene Christian would actually go far in the playoffs. Maybe not semifinals, maybe quarterfinals. They're a potent and a tough team. It's hard for me, as much as I like UCA and like Derek Powell. UCA's got Nathan Brown as coach. And so that always makes me question how far I would take them in the playoffs, because something happens. I don't know what it is. It's, has all the talent. He has all the talent every year, and just it doesn't. It's something happens, right? So
they just feel so frantic in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's just like the UAC is on crack every time they get into the fourth quarter. It's a close game. It's just just craziness happens in that conference.
Yeah, the Tarleton Southern Utah game was probably one of the most amusing games I watched all year.
Jeez, yeah.
It was some of the worst. I'm like, guys, you gotta invest in a goal line cam or something, because that was that was nuts at the end. Well, listen, I know you two are super busy. I really appreciate you guys coming on. Real quick, I know most folks who watch this know where they can find you, but obviously, besides the book, I had one of you guys a chance to shout out what you do for the FCS, which is a lot. I wasn't joking whenever myself and Chris Grant have both called you the GOAT in conversation, the GOATs plural. But Sam?
ContentHeroSports.com. I'm on Twitter, X, at Sam Herder, FCS. And then we both have a podcast together, FCS Football Talk Podcast. So can find all of the content there.
That's absolutely great. Listen, and by the way, Sam, this is for you. I know you're from Minnesota. Minnesota's got a lengthy history of things like, the bastardization of Duck, Duck, Goose. But, hockey is the number one thing. But hockey's the number one thing, and I wanted to wear the best team ever from Minnesota for you. So I got on the team from Division 5 in Minneapolis.
Oh yeah.
The Mighty Ducks, the absolute greats.
It is, they do call it the state of hockey, but I am rocking some Timberwolves playoff t-shirt from last year. So it's the state of hockey, but it's starting to become the state of basketball as well here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Zach.
Yeah. FCS Football Central on SI. As Sam said, we have a show every Wednesday. You can catch me on the Blue Bloods on YouTube, all podcast streaming platforms with Coach Fred and Timothy, man.
Awesome. Well, once again, guys, I greatly appreciate you coming on. And Brandon asked way earlier in the comments how much alcohol I had to bribe you guys for Frisco. Didn't have to bribe them, but I obviously will be putting rounds to my tab for them coming on here. So
that's why we invite Kevin. All right, SoCon Kamikazes. Kevin.
SoCon Kamikazes. Oh, man. Well, guys, again, once appreciate it. Y'all have a great week. Have a safe Halloween. If you do anything for Halloween, we will talk to you next week.